Persevere, the Restless Ghosts of Leith. Welcome to the ancient Port of Leith, an area with a fascinating legacy. History records date as far back as 1128, identifying the founding of Holyrood Abbey. At a point, Leith commanded the title of Scotland's principal port. The connection of Edinburgh as the capital city allowed Leith to expand and flourish over the coming years. The Borough of Leith gained its independence following the Boroughs Act in 1833, but this came to an end when the local government joined the two in 1920. To many Leith residents, the amalgamation with Edinburgh not considered justified. Remnants of the Edinburgh and Leith boundary exist today. The appropriately titled Boundary Bar, now the Beer House, situated on Leith Walk, contains an iconic brass divide. One half of the pub located in Edinburgh and the other in Leith. Just around the corner from this long-standing Leith location sits Tindal Mini Street. It is here that our first story begins.
My name is Jade. I was born in Edinburgh and grew up in Tindal Mini Street in the early 90s. It was here I would encounter my first ghostly apparition. This experience has left me searching for answers my entire life. I lived on the second story of Tindal Mini Street with my grandparents. I'll always remember that black heavy wooden door leading out to the roads. When it closes, you can hear the echo up to the fourth floor of the building. Entering the stairwell was always cold and you could see the worn dip on each one of the stone steps. The dark path eroded from the past 100 years of residents treading in and out. We knew all of our neighbours and overall it was a safe area. My memories of the area were always pleasant. I was forever playing in the street and in the stairwell, until... It was the summer of 1999 and my dad was visiting from America, so my grandparents offered him their home for a couple of weeks whilst he went on holiday. I was so excited as it wasn't very often I got to spend time with him, so I was always glued to his hip when he arrived. We decided to go to the local video store on Leith Walk and rent a few movies on this particular night. We get back to the flat and he lets me know he's going outside for a cigarette before we settle for the night. He leaves the house and a few minutes go by before I decide to go out to the stairwell and ask him what movie we should watch first. I open the door to the stairwell and, to my surprise, he's not there. I stand on the second landing and shout, "Dad," but there's no answer. I assume he's playing a trick on me as I had an overwhelming sensation of being watched. I look up to the top floor and down to the bottom floor and call for him again. Nothing. I shake off the uneasy feeling and make my way to the main door that goes out to the street as I now realise that's the only other place he could be. As I get inches away from the door, something stops me in my tracks. I'm frozen and I feel a strong sense of dread. That was the first time in my life that I couldn't bring myself to open that door. I make my way back to the second landing and try calling out one more time. I look up towards the skylight and shout, "Dad!" When I look down, I see a woman at the bottom of the stairs, dressed in all black rags with a hood covering her face. I'm frozen in fear and I'm trying to make sense of how she got there. I know she didn't come through the main door as I was just on the bottom floor not even a minute prior. I also would have heard the echo of the door close throughout the stairwell. Suddenly, she starts levitating 2 feet above the ground and makes her way slowly up the staircase. I still can't move, and she gets to about the third step before saying in an old broken voice, "Dad, walk up the street." She continues to approach me and I finally get the courage to run inside the house, slamming the door and locking it behind me. I run into the living room and wait out the longest 10 minutes of my life. I hear the buzzer of the intercom go off. I hesitantly walk into the hallway to answer it and I hear my dad's voice on the other side asking me to let him in. I sigh in relief and ask him, "Where did you go?" He laughs and he says, "Jade, let me in." I ask again, "Where did you go?" He responds,
"Just walked up the street."
I'll continue to search for answers as to who this mysterious woman could be, but I can't help but feel like if I'd opened that door to the main street, something terrible could have happened to me and she prevented that. I often wonder if her residual energy was left over from falling victim to the Black Plague back in 1645, as her clothing resembled to be around that time period. The whole experience has left me inspired to research the paranormal throughout my adult life. I currently travel the US investigating America's most haunted locations and upload my evidence as a web series on YouTube under Ghost Club Paranormal. One day, I plan on returning to Tindal Mini Street and see if I can reconnect with the same entity I did as a child. Hopefully, then I'll get some answers.
Situated off New Haven Road and Pitt Street is an address with a haunted history. The property at the end of the narrow Trafalgar Lane saw poltergeist activity in the early months of 1980. The family first became aware of ghostly footsteps creaking on the stairs and upstairs of the property. It did not take long for terrifying paranormal activity to escalate. The residents at first were not alarmed and put the sounds down to next door neighbours' movement. The building, a converted farmer's cottage, was built in 1804. The 2 4-bedroom property and the neighbouring house stood as the only residence of the predominantly industrial location. After living in the property for over a year, an incident occurred one day. The mother and teenage daughter engaged in a fierce argument that afternoon. The quarrel escalated, resulting in the enraged girl screaming in her mother's face. At that precise moment, something slapped the startled girl on the back of the head. She screamed out and presumed it to be another family member who had assaulted her, but nobody was present in the room except for her mother. When the teenager described the incident, her mother bluntly replied, "Whatever it was that hit you, you bloody deserved it." Some years later, the house owner was startled from his early evening slumber. The sight of a figure watching him from the bottom of the bed caused him to scream out. His wife presumed his revelation the effects of a nightmare and insisted he gets back to sleep. The same nightmarish figure would return to visit him several times over the following years. A relative staying the night in the property met with a frightening event. He ran in terror from the house and into the street outside. It was the early hours of the morning and witnessed by a staff member from the adjacent Thistle Bakery. When the baker approached the man to inquire if he was okay, the shaking relative insisted that something grabbed out at him from the bottom of the bed, only to vanish before his eyes. The owner, shocked when alerted to the commotion outside, when the morning approached his startled brother. He was not entirely surprised when his trembling sibling insisted that a terrifying ghostly figure had confronted him in the confines of the bedroom. The owner calmly insisted that he return to the house and calm down. "Ghosts are nothing new around these parts," he assured the shocked man. The family lived in the property for 14 years. Although alarmed by the paranormal activity that they had witnessed, this did not play a part in their decision to leave. In or around about 1994, they departed from the Trafalgar Lane address and moved to another house. The family member who relayed the story to me insists that he was never really scared by the events. Although a teenager at the height of the activity, he recalls calling out, "Do you want a cup of tea?" whenever the unexplained noises would begin. It was almost like having another guest in the house, one who would never outstay their welcome. When asked of his sister and her supernatural slap to the head, he reckons that the ghost taught her a valuable lesson that day. She never raised her voice or shouted at her mother ever again. As we descend the long, straight stretch of road known as Leith Walk, we arrive at another Leith landmark, the famous Kirkgate, which translates as Way to the Kirk, which dates to 1487. South Leith Parish Church sits within and features connecting names the likes of King James III, Mary of Guise and John Knox. Recently, during excavation works on the nearby Constitution Street, workmen made a bizarre discovery by the church boundary. An adult skeleton buried in the middle of the road, considered by experts to be 700 years old. Coatfield Lane runs off Constitution Street and connects with the Kirkgate. It is here that the ghost of an older woman observed. Dressed in old-fashioned clothes and holding a posy, her spirit is said to depart from Coatfield Lane and disappear along nearby Queen Charlotte Street. Witnesses have described a scent of flowers after her appearance, only to vanish before their eyes. The sight of a man in Highland attire has also been reported. The figure sighted along Constitution Street late at night. The terrifying apparition witnessed running and also sitting across from the entrance to Coatfield Lane. There is a theory that the man may be Arthur Elphinston, 6th Lord of Balmerino. His nearby property, Balmerino House, sat close to Coatfield Lane's vicinity and is now the site of St Mary, Star of the Sea Church. Lord Balmerino was executed in the Tower of London on the 18th of August 1746 for his participation in the Jacobite risings of 1715 and 1745. It took no less than 3 separate attempts to behead the condemned man that fateful bloody day. On a summer night in 2018, local Leith residents Andrew Bryden and his wife Heather walked home alone the now darkening Constitution Street. Heather gained her husband's attention when she suddenly moved, altering her path as they passed St Mary's Church entrance. Andrew, intrigued by her sudden movement, inquired as to why. Heather, with an unconcerned reply, informed him she was moving aside to bypass the older man. Andrew, bewildered by his wife's revelation, looked back to double-check for the man. There was nobody there. Heather insisted that she had moved to avoid an older man wearing a flat cap, flannel trousers and seated by the church entrance. The man dressed in a traditional dockworker style, but from years ago, possibly the 1940s. The thoroughly puzzled couple, convinced that what they saw that warm summer evening in August 2018 may have been another of Constitution Street's ghostly residents. Something strange occurred in an area of Leith Docks some years ago. It was a Saturday afternoon. A painter named Stuart was carrying out work at a property in the heart of the docks. The building, owned by local firm Bredero Shaw, sat entirely unoccupied that day. Making good progress on painting a section of Bredero House, Stuart paused for a moment upon hearing the main door open and then close. He ceased painting and ventured to the main entrance, calling out as he walked. The undeterred man expected the noise to be that of the security guard arriving, or maybe a work colleague. The painter called out with a suggestion of, "I'll put the kettle on." Nobody replied. When Stuart arrived at the main entrance of the building, there was nobody there at all. To give you an idea of how peculiar this incident was, Bradero House stands situated in the far reaches of Leith Docks and a challenging location to reach on foot. When Stuart peered through the door, there was not a footprint or a tyre track to see. This incident was not the first time that this had occurred. The main output from the Bradero Shaw Company was the exportation of enormous cast iron pipes. The giant structures would be prepared in Leith Docks and then shipped off to Scandinavia and further afield. One morning, while working by the vicinity of the pipes, an unnamed worker claims to have witnessed a dark shape about the same size as an adult male. It was watching him from a distance. The worker stopped for a moment and waved to the figure, but there was no reply. The man became unnerved by the shape's intense, unrelenting stance and turned to ask a colleague who it was. When he returned with his co-worker, the figure had vanished. A dark figure, reported by staff from the canteen, appeared one dark, misty day. Kitchen staff claimed to have encountered a rough shape one afternoon and had no idea who it could be. A staff member returning with supplies claims to have been pursued by a large, broad-shouldered man. The figure would not reply when called upon and eventually vanished into the fading afternoon light. I recently spoke to somebody who not only worked in Leith Docks for many years, but also claims to know the story and identity of the phantom. The witness, now in his late 80s, recalls a security guard employed by Bradero Shaw, whom he reckons continues to haunt the area. He was a man with a terrible temper and shunned by many of the employees. After the guard died in the 1980s, soon afterwards the disturbances commenced. The ex-employee I spoke with disclosed the security guard's name to me, but asked me not to publish the identity for discretion to the man's family. My contact remains convinced that the same security guard haunts the grounds of Leith Docks. He is eternally patrolling the area of Bradero Shaw House and the lands where he worked so many years ago.